I never imagined that one ordinary message could completely rewrite how I see my past, my relationships, and the people I trusted the most. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and until recently, I genuinely believed my life was calm, predictable, and safe. I wasn't chasing luxury or status. I just wanted stability, a job I didn't hate, a relationship that felt secure, and a small circle of people I thought would always have my back. My girlfriend, Emily, was at the center of that life. We had been together for almost 4 years. We met through mutual friends at a small house party, and from the very beginning, everything felt natural. She wasn't dramatic or overly intense. She listened. She remembered details. She made me feel seen in a way I hadn't experienced before. Within a year, we were living together. By year 3, we were talking seriously about marriage. I trusted her completely. I never checked her phone. I never questioned where she was. I thought jealousy was a sign of insecurity, and I was proud of how healthy our relationship felt. Looking back now, that blind trust wasn't maturity. It was naivety. About a year ago, small things started changing. Nothing that screamed danger. Emily began working longer hours. She said her company was short-staffed and deadlines were brutal. Sometimes she'd come home late and barely talk. Other nights, she wouldn't come home at all, saying she stayed over at a co-worker's place because it was closer to the office. She always had a reasonable explanation, and every explanation came with reassurance. She'd tell me I was the only thing keeping her grounded. I believed her. What I didn't know was that during those same months, she was carefully constructing a second version of her life, one that existed entirely without me. The night everything truly began was unremarkable. A normal weekday. Emily told me she'd be working late again. I ordered takeout, turned on a random show, and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my chest. Around 10:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. That decision, opening that message, changed everything. The message was short. No emojis. No introduction. Just a single sentence that made my stomach drop the second I read it. Hey, this is probably going to sound crazy, but I think we're both dating the same person. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen. My first instinct was that it had to be spam or some kind of mistake. I replied, asking who they were talking about. The response came almost immediately. Emily. My hands started shaking. I remember rereading her name over and over, hoping it would somehow change. I asked for proof, even though a part of me already knew what was coming. A moment later, screenshots appeared. Her profile picture, her writing style, her words, phrases she used with me. The same jokes, the same affection, just directed at someone else. I felt physically sick. My chest tightened, my head started spinning, and I couldn't sit still. I paced my apartment for hours, replaying every moment from the past year, trying to spot where everything went wrong. Every late night, every canceled plan, every excuse I accepted without question. The guy introduced himself as Ryan. He said he'd been seeing Emily for about 8 months. She told him she was single, that she'd just gotten out of a long relationship and didn't want anything complicated. He believed her, just like I did. We started comparing details. Dates, trips, stories she'd told us. The timelines lined up perfectly in the worst possible way. When she was working late with me, she was staying at his place. When she was visiting family for a weekend, she was on a trip with him. Ryan wasn't aggressive. He wasn't angry at me. If anything, he sounded just as lost as I felt. That made it harder. This wasn't some random guy trying to start drama. This was another victim. By the time the sun came up, neither of us had slept. We both knew there was no way to unsee what we'd discovered. There was only one question left. What were we going to do next? Emily stood frozen in the doorway for what felt like an eternity. Her eyes darted between me and Ryan, the color draining from her face as if she had just realized the world she had carefully constructed was collapsing in seconds. For a few long moments, she said nothing. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. The air in the apartment was thick and heavy, almost suffocating, and I could feel my chest tightening. I had spent so long imagining this confrontation in my head, yet nothing prepared me for the raw intensity of seeing her guilt in real time. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. I can explain. I cut her off immediately, my own voice shaking with a mix of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief. Explain? How do you explain lying to 2 people for months? Living a double life? Taking money from both of us? I didn't even realize I was yelling until Ryan gently placed a hand on my shoulder. Even he looked stunned, trying to stay calm while the woman he trusted with his own emotions was unraveling before him. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to speak again. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I just got confused. I didn't know how to choose. I thought I could make it work. I could feel the anger boiling in me, but it was laced with a deeper, sharper pain. Betrayal is never just anger. It's disbelief, shame, confusion, and a kind of aching emptiness that refuses to leave. And that emptiness was settling in me like a heavy stone. Ryan finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. Emily, this isn't a mistake you can just apologize for. You manipulated both of us. You lied about everything. And now we know the truth. There's no going back. She flinched, as if the words physically struck her, and I could see the panic rising. The woman who had once seemed so untouchable, so in control of both our lives, was now exposed, fragile, and desperate. For a moment, I wanted to say everything I had felt over the last year. The nights I worried about her absence. The moments I tried to rationalize her lies in my head. Every subtle sign I had ignored. Every gut feeling I had pushed aside because I trusted her. I wanted to pour it all out. But instead, I just stared. I wanted her to see the weight of what she had done, the consequences that would follow. No words could fully capture the devastation she caused. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. Both Ryan and I sat silently, letting the weight of the situation hang between us. I realized something chilling. Emily wasn't just a cheater. She was someone who had carefully built a parallel life, exploiting trust, love, and vulnerability to serve her own desires. And now, exposed, there was nowhere left for her to hide. I looked at Ryan, and he nodded. We both understood the same thing without words. This betrayal wasn't just personal. It was permanent. Emily had destroyed the foundation of everything she claimed to care about. She wasn't going to just apologize and return to the way things were. There would be no reconciliation, not after this. That night, I made a decision. Emily would not control my emotions any longer. I would not allow her manipulation to dictate my life. And though it hurt more than anything else I had ever experienced, I knew the next step was clear. She had to be removed from our lives completely. Not out of revenge, but out of self-preservation. The days after the confrontation were surreal. Emily didn't leave quietly. She called, texted, and even showed up at my apartment unannounced, each time insisting she could explain that it wasn't as bad as we thought, that we were misunderstanding her intentions. Her words were a flood of half-truths and emotional manipulation, carefully designed to pull me back into the very chaos she had created. Every call and message felt like a test, testing whether I was still gullible, whether I could be swayed to forgive. Ryan and I exchanged messages constantly, trying to make sense of her actions. We realized she had crafted the entire story of her confusion to make both of us feel partially at fault. She claimed she loved us both, that she was terrified of losing either, and that she never intended to hurt anyone. But the evidence we had, messages, photos, receipts, told a completely different story. She wasn't confused. She was calculating, maintaining two separate lives for months, lying consistently, and even borrowing money from both of us to fund her double existence. Friends began noticing tension, asking questions, sensing that something had gone terribly wrong. Emily tried to frame the situation differently, telling them I was overreacting, that I was controlling, that I was making her out to be a villain. A few mutual friends even messaged me, asking what I had done to provoke this. It was maddening. Not only had she betrayed trust on a personal level, but now she was actively rewriting the narrative, painting herself as the victim to anyone willing to listen. I realized then that exposure wasn't enough. People had to see the truth for themselves. So Ryan and I started compiling everything. Screenshots, messages, timelines. Every lie, every excuse, every act of manipulation. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming our sense of reality. She couldn't continue to control the perception of her actions. We had to make sure the truth was undeniable. Even after that, the emotional fallout was heavy. I had to take a step back from friends who didn't understand, from colleagues who were asking vague questions, from anyone who might give her words more weight than the evidence we had. Sleep was elusive. Eating felt mechanical. I would catch myself replaying every moment with Emily in my head, wondering how I hadn't noticed the patterns, how I had allowed myself to be deceived so completely. The betrayal felt endless because she had woven it into the very fabric of my life, touching work, friendships, and intimate moments alike. By the end of that week, I realized that healing wouldn't come from confrontation alone. It would come from distance, from reclaiming my own sense of control. I blocked her number. I stopped responding to calls. I told friends the truth, and I refused to let her presence dominate my life any longer. But even as I tried to move on, a lingering question haunted me. How do you ever truly trust anyone again after a betrayal this calculated, this deliberate, and this deeply personal? The following week felt like living inside a storm I couldn't escape. Emily had gone silent for a day, and I thought maybe she had finally realized that her actions had consequences. But then the messages started again. Short, pleading texts, apologetic emails, and even a long voicemail that she sent to both me and Ryan simultaneously. Every word was carefully constructed. Her voice trembled. Her language suggested remorse. But beneath it all was a subtle attempt to regain control. It was exhausting to read, exhausting to listen to, and yet part of me still ached to believe her. Ryan and I were in constant contact, discussing strategy, how to handle the situation, and how to shield ourselves from further manipulation. He told me he'd confronted her, and that she had tried the same excuses: confusion, love for both, fear of losing either one. The word fear was repeated so often that it started to feel like a shield she hid behind, a way to justify her choices while leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. I began confiding in close friends, but that brought its own complications. Emily had been spinning a narrative to mutual acquaintances, portraying me as the controlling, irrational partner, exaggerating my anger and my responses. A few friends were hesitant, unsure what to believe, and some even privately questioned my version of events. That hit harder than any betrayal. It was as though her lies were not just about us. They were about controlling reality itself. By midweek, I realized I had to stop just reacting. I started documenting everything systematically. Screenshots, timestamps, emails, call logs, even receipts for money she had borrowed from both of us. I created a chronological timeline of her manipulations and betrayals. Every attempt she had made to hide the truth, every lie, every calculated move, it was all there, undeniable. The act of compiling it gave me a strange sense of control. For the first time since discovering her double life, I felt like I was reclaiming a small piece of my sanity. Meanwhile, Emily escalated. She began showing up near my workplace, claiming she just wanted to talk. Ryan mentioned she had started contacting his friends, trying to rebuild credibility by convincing them he was overreacting. It was relentless. She wasn't just trying to win us back. She was trying to rewrite history entirely, making herself the victim of her own actions. Every encounter, every message, every attempt to explain herself only reminded me of the depth of her manipulation. One evening, after blocking her number again, I realized how much energy I had poured into monitoring her, protecting myself, and ensuring that she didn't succeed in twisting the story. My mind was exhausted, my trust in people was fractured, and yet I felt a grim determination. This wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about survival, about making sure that her carefully constructed web of lies could not entangle anyone else, including friends who might unknowingly be pulled into her narrative. By the weekend, I was emotionally drained but resolute. I blocked her social media, informed mutual friends of the truth, and made a conscious decision. I would no longer allow her to have power over me. Ryan and I even discussed whether we should go public with everything, not for revenge, but so that the truth was fully visible. This was bigger than one relationship. It was a complete exposure of someone who had spent months deliberately deceiving everyone around her. By the start of the following week, Emily's attempts to manipulate reality were escalating. She had contacted a few mutual friends, telling them that I was overreacting, that I was jealous, controlling, and making a huge deal out of nothing. At first, some friends hesitated, unsure who to believe. A handful even avoided me for a few days, quietly asking Emily for her side before coming back to me with cautious questions. Every word I had to answer felt exhausting. Every explanation felt like it required proof that the betrayal was real. Ryan and I were in constant coordination, sharing screenshots, timelines, and any evidence that demonstrated the full scope of her deception. It was grueling, reliving the lies and double life she had maintained for months. The more we documented, the more horrifying the details became. Messages that seemed innocent at first glance now revealed layers of manipulation. She had kept each of us in carefully curated bubbles of trust, designed so we wouldn't realize the other existed. Despite our efforts, Emily wasn't backing down. She started showing up at places we frequented, sending texts claiming she just wanted closure or to make things right. Each time, it was clear she was attempting to regain control, not to apologize genuinely. Her words, though tearful, carried undertones of guilt-tripping and subtle threats. It was exhausting to counter every attempt, to remain calm while her presence reminded me of every moment of betrayal. The friends we could trust most stepped in gradually. They listened to our evidence, read through timelines, and for the first time, the weight on my shoulders began to lift. Knowing that people we cared about believed the truth was a relief, but it didn't erase the damage. Trust, once broken, leaves scars. The more I reflected, the more I realized that her betrayal wasn't just about relationships. It was about power, manipulation, and control. She had proven she could deceive those closest to her without hesitation. By midweek, I was exhausted emotionally and physically. Ryan and I discussed whether confrontation alone would suffice, or if we needed to ensure that Emily couldn't continue rewriting her story unchecked. Together, we agreed to a plan: no engagement with her attempts at manipulation, focus on documenting every interaction, and quietly inform mutual friends of the truth. She had tried to make us look irrational. Now, we would let facts speak for themselves. It was a tense period, walking a fine line between standing firm and letting anger consume me. Each time Emily texted, I felt the pull, the desire to respond, to hear her side, to get some closure. But every time I considered it, I remembered the pattern: manipulation disguised as remorse. I blocked her number once more and resolved to maintain strict boundaries. My life, my mental health, and my trust had to come first. Even with these boundaries, the emotional toll was severe. I found myself questioning not just her, but my own judgment. How had I missed the signs? How had someone so close simultaneously created a double life and managed to deceive both of us for months? That lingering doubt made the healing process slow and painful, but it also reinforced a lesson. Some betrayals are deliberate, calculated, and designed to teach harsh truths about trust, perception, and human nature. By the end of that week, the storm had settled slightly, though the aftershocks were still present. Emily's reach had diminished. Mutual friends were beginning to understand the reality. Ryan and I, though exhausted, felt a cautious relief. For the first time, the truth had power, and she could no longer dictate the narrative. But one thing was painfully clear: the damage was done, and the recovery would take much longer than anyone anticipated. By the middle of the next week, it became painfully clear that Emily had no intention of stepping back quietly. Her messages escalated from pleading to desperate, her voice notes alternating between sobbing and angry, manipulative tones. She tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming that Ryan and I were overreacting and that we were making her life impossible. Every word was a trap, a subtle attempt to make us doubt ourselves, to make the betrayal feel like our fault. I could feel my patience thinning. Each message, each call, each unannounced visit reminded me of the careful web of lies she had spun. She had maintained 2 lives for months with precision, and now, even when confronted, she was attempting to control the aftermath. Ryan and I, exhausted but resolute, made a pact: no engagement beyond what was necessary to protect ourselves and the truth. Anything else was just an opportunity for her to manipulate further. It wasn't just private anymore. Mutual friends and colleagues had started noticing tension, and rumors were spreading. Emily, in her usual manipulative fashion, had begun feeding them selective information, trying to cast herself as misunderstood and us as unreasonable. Some friends approached me cautiously, asking questions that implied doubt. I had to remain composed, presenting facts calmly while resisting the urge to vent all the fury I felt inside. I knew that any emotional outburst would only play into her narrative. One afternoon, I received a long voicemail from her. Her tone wavered between pleading and accusatory. I just want us to understand each other. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. I love both of you. Can't you see I'm trying? Listening to her, I felt a mixture of disbelief and disgust. This wasn't remorse. This was manipulation disguised as vulnerability. I realized then that no amount of talking could make her understand the consequences of her actions, because understanding would mean taking responsibility, and she was not capable of that. Ryan and I discussed the voicemail and agreed that it would be the last one we acknowledged. From that moment on, we focused solely on documenting everything: screenshots, messages, timelines, call records. Our goal wasn't revenge, it was evidence. Proof that Emily's deception was calculated and deliberate. By compiling it meticulously, we reclaimed control over the narrative she had tried to dominate. The emotional weight of the past weeks settled like a fog. I felt drained, suspicious, and yet strangely empowered. Seeing the depth of her duplicity, the extent to which she had manipulated our emotions, finances, and trust, left me shaken. But it also clarified one undeniable truth. I could no longer allow her presence in my life, or the lives of those around me, to dictate reality. That weekend, after the last confrontation, I blocked her completely. Phone, social media, email, every channel closed. I informed mutual friends of the truth, presented the documented evidence calmly, and set boundaries firmly. For the first time, there was silence. A tense, uneasy silence, but also a relief. For the first time, I could begin to breathe without the constant weight of her lies pressing down. Yet, even as I tried to move forward, a gnawing thought lingered. The betrayal was not just about the past. It was about trust, about the fragility of human perception, and about how carefully one person could manipulate the lives of two people who thought they knew her completely. Recovery wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be easy. But at least, for the first time, the truth was mine to hold, and Emily's control was broken. By now, Emily's presence in my life was reduced to nothing but occasional, desperate attempts to break through the walls I had set. She sent messages at odd hours, claiming she wanted to talk, one last time, posting vague stories on social media implying that she was the victim, and even trying to reach out to mutual friends to cast doubt on my account. Each time, I reminded myself of the months of lies, the manipulation, the dual life she had maintained with frightening precision. This was not someone who made mistakes. This was someone who consciously deceived everyone around her, and now she was trying to control the aftermath. Ryan and I had grown closer through the ordeal, bonded by the shared betrayal and by the need to protect ourselves. We had created a timeline of everything Emily had done, every lie she had told, and every moment she had deliberately manipulated our emotions. Looking at it all, it was overwhelming. I realized that this wasn't just about a relationship. It was about reclaiming reality from someone who had been systematically twisting it for months. I started to take small steps to reclaim my life. I unfollowed social media accounts that reminded me of her, blocked every avenue through which she could contact me, and even avoided places where I knew she might appear. Friends who had doubted me gradually came around once they saw the evidence. Conversations that had been tense, awkward, or filled with hesitation became clear and direct. For the first time in weeks, I could speak without worrying that Emily's manipulations were influencing the perception of others. One afternoon, I received an unexpected message. It was from a mutual friend, a simple note. Emily has stopped contacting anyone. No stories, no calls, nothing. I think she finally realizes she's out of control. I felt a strange mix of relief and lingering anger. Relief that the constant emotional assault had ended, but anger at the months of deceit and the betrayal that had nearly destroyed my trust in people entirely. The weeks after Emily's final attempts at contact were strangely quiet. For the first time in months, I could breathe without the constant tension of anticipating lies or manipulation. The weight on my shoulders, though still present in memory, had started to lift. Ryan and I occasionally checked in with each other, not because of ongoing drama, but to support one another as we rebuilt trust in our lives and with the people around us. It was a quiet, mutual understanding. We had survived something calculated and cruel, and the bond it created, strangely enough, was genuine. I began reflecting on the entire experience, not just the betrayal itself, but the aftermath. Emily had been meticulous, careful, and manipulative. Her ability to maintain two lives, deceive two people emotionally and financially, and control narratives to her advantage was astonishing. in a terrifying way. But more than her cunning, what struck me was the lesson it left. Trust is fragile, and the human mind can be blindsided by deception even from those we love most. It taught me to value instincts over comfort and facts over appearances. I reached out to friends who had been unsure or confused during the ordeal. Conversations that were once awkward became honest and clear. People apologized for doubts, and I apologized for any emotional outbursts that had spilled over in moments of hurt. Rebuilding trust in friendships was its own process, a slow and careful untangling of the threads Emily had tried to manipulate. But step by step, clarity returned. The truth had a grounding effect that no amount of her manipulation could undo. Personally, I focused on self-recovery. I allowed myself to feel anger, grief, and disappointment, not as a burden, but as a necessary part of processing what had happened. I returned to hobbies and routines I had neglected, re-established boundaries I should have kept long ago, and embraced a newfound vigilance in relationships. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also provided clarity. Self-respect and personal boundaries are non-negotiable, and learning to trust wisely is an essential skill. Emily faded from my life entirely. There were no more calls, no more messages, no social media interactions. The person who had once been at the center of my emotional world became a distant memory, a lesson wrapped in pain. And though the scars remained, they were also a reminder of resilience, of survival, and of the strength that comes from reclaiming your life from someone who sought to control it. Looking back, I can say this: betrayal changes you. Yes, but it doesn't have to define you. You can emerge stronger, wiser, and more aware. You can rebuild trust carefully with the right people. And above all, you can reclaim your reality, no matter how thoroughly someone tried to distort it. For anyone reading this, if you've been blindsided, if someone you trusted has deceived you, know that the path forward isn't easy, but it exists. Boundaries, honesty, and clarity are the tools you need. And while the scars will remain, they will remind you that you survived, you fought back, and ultimately, you reclaimed your life.